In New Jersey, I thought I knew my daughter-in-law better than anyone, but the truth was darker than I could have imagined. It had been a quiet Wednesday afternoon when I first noticed something was wrong. I was in the kitchen, making my usual pot of coffee, when I saw Jake through the window pulling into the driveway. My son, Jake Keller, had been my pride and joy ever since he was a child. I raised him on my own after his mother passed away when he was just a teenager. Every milestone in his life, his high school graduation, his first job, and eventually, his marriage, had felt like my own. His success was mine. And for all these years, I had always trusted him to make the right choices. When Jake married Laura, I was beyond happy for him. She was everything a father could hope for in a daughter-in-law. She had been sweet, down-to-earth, and always so respectful of our family. I remember thinking that this was it, the perfect couple. But little by little, something changed. I hadn't noticed it at first, not when it was just small shifts in their routine, the occasional missed dinner or a text from Laura that seemed a little off. It was only when Jake started confiding in me about his worries that I started to see it more clearly. Jake stepped into the kitchen that evening, looking more tired than usual. He dropped his briefcase onto the table and sighed. "Hey, Dad." He greeted me with a forced smile, trying to act like everything was fine. But I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Long day?" I asked, setting the coffee pot down. I could tell something was bothering him. "Yeah, work's been hectic," Jake said, running his hand through his hair. "But it's not that. It's Laura. I think something's wrong." I turned to face him fully, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean? You 2VE been solid for years. What's going on?" Jake hesitated, looking down at his hands. He was always the more reserved one in the family, but when something was really bothering him, he wouldn't hold back. "I don't know. She's different, Dad. The last few months, she's been distant. She's gone out more with her friends, spends long hours at work, and I don't know. She's not the same person. And when I ask her, she just gets defensive or says I'm overthinking it." I could see the frustration and confusion on his face. "Have you tried talking to her? Really talking?" I asked, trying to offer the same advice I had given him throughout his life. "I have," Jake said with a defeated sigh. "But it's like she's shutting me out. And honestly, it's killing me. I love her, Dad, but I feel like I'm losing her." I could feel his pain. His words were raw, like a wound that had been festering for too long. I hated seeing my son like this, but I couldn't deny the reality of the situation. Something was definitely off, but I didn't want to believe it. Not yet. I was too close to the situation, and I didn't want to believe that the woman I'd grown so fond of, the woman who had been like a daughter to me, could do something to hurt my son. So I pushed the thought to the back of my mind, telling myself I was being paranoid. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept wandering back to the conversation I had with Jake. There had to be an explanation for Laura's behavior, right? Maybe it was just work stress or something trivial. Maybe I was making a mountain out of a molehill. But the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. Something about this didn't feel right. A few days later, I decided to visit their house. It was one of those unannounced visits. Nothing too formal, just a chance to check in. I rang the doorbell, and Laura answered. She gave me a warm smile, but there was a tension in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Hi, Mr. Keller," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "What a nice surprise. Just thought I'd come by, check in on you both," I said, trying to keep things casual. "How's everything going?" She hesitated for a moment before responding, almost too quickly. "Oh, everything's fine. Just, busy. Jake's been working late, and I've been getting stuff done here." I nodded, though something in her tone seemed off. As I walked through the living room, I noticed a few things that were unusual. First, the lack of personal photos of the two of them on the walls. Only a few framed pictures from their wedding and some generic family shots. There was also an unfamiliar jacket hanging in the hallway, something I was sure wasn't Jake's. "Where's Jake?" I asked, glancing around. "Oh, he's out. Another late-night thing at work," Laura said quickly, her eyes darting away. She wasn't making eye contact, and the way she said it, so forced, sent a chill down my spine. As the conversation continued, I began to feel more and more unsettled. She seemed distracted, almost as if she was hiding something. I tried to brush it off, but my gut was telling me to pay closer attention. The next few weeks were a blur. Every time I saw Laura, there was an air of detachment, like she was hiding something from the world. But it wasn't just the way she acted around me. It was the little things, The way she'd avoid Jake's questions or give him short answers when he tried to talk to her about their plans. Jake had noticed too. He started coming to me with more concerns. "She's been going out a lot, Dad. She says she's meeting friends, but I haven't seen any of them in ages. And when I try to call, she's always busy." One night, I got a call that would set everything in motion. It was from a private investigator I had hired. After Jake's constant worries, I decided to get to the bottom of it, though I never thought it would lead me down this path. "Mr. Keller, I have the information you requested," the investigator said. His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something more serious. "Your daughter-in-law, Laura Keller, has been meeting a man on several occasions. I've followed her to a few locations, and she's been spending significant time with him." I felt like the ground beneath me had cracked open. The words didn't seem real. My mind raced as the investigator continued to describe the places she'd been with this man. Dinners, hotel meetings, secretive rendezvous. "She's been seeing him for months," the investigator said, his voice steady. "I have pictures, records. It's clear they've been involved." My chest tightened, and I gripped the phone as if it was the only thing holding me together. How could this be happening? How could Laura betray my son in such a way? And why had I never seen it? I ended the call and sat there in shock. The woman I had trusted, the woman who had been part of our family for so long, was living a lie. Worse still, she was doing it to my son, the one person who would be the most devastated by the truth. But I had a decision to make now. Do I protect Jake from the truth, or do I tell him everything and risk destroying his marriage? I couldn't make that decision on my own. I had to think about what was best for him, what was best for our family. I sat there for what felt like an eternity. The weight of the secret pressed down on me, suffocating me with every breath. I could hear the clock ticking in the background, marking the passing of time as if it were counting down to something inevitable. I had a choice to make, but in my heart, I knew it wasn't as simple as just telling Jake the truth. Jake trusted me more than anyone in the world. I had been his rock since his mother died. We'd been through so much together, and I knew how deeply he loved Laura. But I also knew how much this would hurt him. The betrayal, knowing that the woman he had married, the woman he had built a life with, had been seeing another man for months. It would shatter him. And yet, could I live with myself if I didn't tell him? Could I stand by and watch him be further deceived, knowing the truth and doing nothing? I picked up the phone again, dialing the private investigator's number. I needed more details, more confirmation, if only for my own peace of mind. The line rang once, twice, before the investigator answered. "Mr. Keller," he said, his voice still professional but carrying a hint of concern. "Have you made a decision?" "I'm not sure," I replied, rubbing my forehead. "I don't know if I should tell him. Jake's been through so much already. I don't want to destroy his life." "I understand your hesitation," the investigator said calmly. "But you have to ask yourself, what's worse? Not telling him and letting this lie continue, or confronting the truth, no matter how painful it might be?" I didn't answer right away. He was right. The longer I kept this secret, the more I became complicit in Laura's deceit. But exposing it wasn't an easy thing to do. I didn't know if I could bear to watch my son's heart break. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "You need to decide if you want to be the one to tell him," the investigator replied. "I can provide all the evidence you need, but the conversation has to come from you. If you decide to move forward with this, it'll be your call. Just know that the truth is already out there." I thanked him and hung up. The decision felt even heavier now. I didn't want to make my son's pain my responsibility, but I couldn't keep living with the weight of this secret. The next few days dragged by in a blur. Jake continued to visit, but he was quieter, more withdrawn. He still had that troubled look in his eyes, the one that told me something wasn't right, but he wasn't asking about Laura anymore. I could see the distance growing between them, and it hurt me to see him like this, though I couldn't bring myself to do anything about it. One evening, after dinner, I found myself pacing in the living room. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Should I confront Laura? Should I protect Jake from the truth for a little longer, hoping things would somehow get better? Or was this just the inevitable consequence of what had already started, this terrible web of lies? I heard Jake's voice from the hallway, his footsteps echoing as he entered the room. He had that same defeated look on his face, and something in his posture told me that whatever had been bothering him, he was reaching the breaking point. "Dad," he said quietly, his voice low but serious. "I can't do this anymore." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I can't keep pretending like everything's fine with Laura, he said, sitting down on the couch beside me. His hands were trembling slightly, but he tried to hide it. I don't know what's going on with her. I feel like I'm losing her, and I don't know why. She's not the same person anymore. I looked at him, my chest tight with both pain and guilt. I could see how much he was struggling. He had no idea what was really happening, but he knew something wasn't right. I felt like a fraud, sitting there, pretending I didn't know the truth. I think you need to talk to her, I said softly. Maybe she's just going through something. You should ask her directly. You deserve to know what's really going on. Jake looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. What if she tells me she's been seeing someone else? His voice cracked slightly. I couldn't take it, Dad. I love her. I thought she loved me too. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to spill out. This wasn't my burden to carry, but it was killing me watching my son suffer. You have to be ready for whatever she says, I said quietly, my voice steady but filled with the weight of truth. Whatever it is, you'll have to face it. You're stronger than you think. Jake nodded, though I could tell he wasn't convinced. He stood up, running a hand through his hair. I'm going to talk to her. I have to know the truth. I don't care how much it hurts. I watched him go, my heart heavy with the knowledge that the conversation he was about to have could change everything. I wanted to tell him to be careful, to prepare himself for what was coming, but I knew I couldn't interfere anymore. The truth was out there now, and as much as I wanted to protect him, I couldn't shield him from what he had to face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Laura's face, saw the secret she was hiding from my son. I wondered if she had even thought about what this betrayal would do to him. Did she even care? And then, I thought about the man she had been seeing. Who was he? What had he promised her that made her willing to risk everything? Was he some kind of comfort or escape for her? Or was he just another piece of this twisted game she'd been playing? I knew one thing for sure. Jake had to hear the truth, no matter how much it hurt him. He deserved that much. The next morning, the house felt quieter than usual. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was teetering on the edge of something irreversible. Jake had left early, presumably to speak with Laura, and I hadn't heard from him since. I couldn't sit still, my thoughts racing. I was consumed by what was happening behind those closed doors. Had he confronted her yet? What had she said? Would she deny everything? Or would the truth come crashing down, revealing the extent of the betrayal? I made myself a cup of coffee, my hands shaking more than I cared to admit. For all the preparation, all the planning in the world, I had no idea how Jake would handle this. It was easy to say he deserved to know the truth, but could anyone really be prepared for the kind of revelation that would tear their life apart? I had my own doubts now, doubts that maybe I'd pushed him too far, too fast. Then, just as the clock struck noon, my phone rang. It was Jake. My heart leaped into my throat. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it was time. I picked up the phone and pressed it to my ear. Dad. His voice was strained, tight. I could hear the rawness in it. The way it was thick with emotion he was clearly trying to hold back. Jake, I said gently, trying to keep my voice steady. How did it go? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could feel the tension between us, the weight of everything unsaid. She didn't deny it. Jake finally spoke, and the words hit me like a punch to the gut. She didn't deny a damn thing. She just sat there. She told me she's been seeing him for the last 6 months. And when I asked her why she didn't tell me, why she betrayed me like this, she said she didn't love me anymore. She said she needed something more, something I couldn't give her. I closed my eyes, my heart sinking. I had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud, hearing my son's devastation in his voice, made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. Jake, I'm so sorry. I whispered, my throat thick with emotion. You didn't deserve this. You've been nothing but good to her. I thought she was my forever dad. Jake continued, his voice breaking. She was supposed to be the one I grew old with. But now I don't know who she is anymore. She's a stranger to me. I could hear the tears in his voice, but I didn't know how to comfort him. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, but I knew this was something he had to process on his own. He had to face this truth, no matter how painful it was. I had prepared him to hear it, but I couldn't prepare him for how much it would hurt. What are you going to do now? I asked softly, wanting to offer him some kind of direction, something that might give him a sense of control over the situation. I don't know, Dad. I don't know what to do. She left. She packed her things, said she was going to stay with him. And that was it. I don't think I can go back to that house, knowing what she did to me. I don't even know if I want to. There was another long silence. I could hear Jake's breath hitching as he struggled to keep it together. I had never heard him sound so broken, and it tore me apart. Jake, listen to me, I said, my voice firm yet gentle. You don't need her. You're stronger than you think. And this will hurt, but you'll get through it. I'll be here, no matter what. You don't have to do this alone. I know, Dad, Jake replied, his voice small, almost defeated. I just didn't expect this. I never thought she would do this to me. People surprise us, son. But that doesn't mean you have to let this define you. You'll get through it. You always do. I just don't know how I'm supposed to move on, Jake said softly. I thought she was my everything. I know, I said, trying to offer some comfort. But the truth is, she wasn't the right one for you. I know this feels like the end of the world, but I promise you, it's just the beginning of something better. You'll find someone who truly deserves you. Jake was quiet for a moment. I could hear him trying to hold it together, but the rawness of his emotions was too much for him to hide. Thanks, Dad, he said finally, his voice a little stronger, though still thick with grief. I'll figure it out. I just need some time. I'll be right here, I reassured him. Take all the time you need. And remember, you're not alone. The line went quiet, and I hung up the phone slowly, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but knowing it wasn't over. Jake was in pain, and there was nothing I could do to take that away. But at least he knew the truth now. At least he didn't have to live in the dark anymore. But that left me with one question. What about Laura? What happened now? She had made her choice. She had chosen to betray my son, to shatter everything they had built. I had spent the last few days wondering if I should confront her, if I should tell her what I knew. But what would that accomplish? Would it even matter? I sat there for a long time, considering the options. Confronting Laura seemed pointless now. Jake had already heard everything from her own lips. There was no need to revisit the past. No need to try and reason with someone who had already made their choice. But something inside me wanted to make sure she didn't walk away without facing the consequences of her actions. She had taken everything from my son, his trust, his love, and his future, and I wasn't going to let her just walk away without some kind of reckoning. It had been a few days since Jake's world had crumbled, and I could tell he was trying to piece together what was left of it. He spent most of his time alone, at home or at work, and though he still called, his voice wasn't the same. The weight of the truth hung over him like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. I wanted to do everything I could to help him, but there was only so much I could say to ease his pain. The thought of Laura, of the woman who had once been so dear to me, nagged at me constantly. I could still remember the way she used to smile at family gatherings, the way she had made herself an integral part of our lives. But now, all I could think about was the betrayal. I hadn't seen her since the night she walked out on Jake, but I knew she hadn't gone far. I had checked. She was staying at her sister's apartment on the other side of town. I had to face her. I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for Jake. He had been deceived, and she needed to understand the weight of her actions, to realize what she had stolen from him. So I called her. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was tentative when she answered, as if she knew this conversation was inevitable but had been hoping to avoid it. "Mr. Keller," she said, her voice polite but distant. "What can I do for you?" I could hear the hesitation in her words, the thinly veiled attempt at control. She was trying to play the same calm game she always had, but I knew better. I knew this wasn't a game anymore. This was real. "Laura," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "About what?" she asked, her tone almost defensive. "I don't think there's anything left to say." "There is," I said firmly, "and you know it. I'm coming over to your sister's place. We need to discuss what you've done to my son. The truth needs to be faced." There was silence on the line. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head, calculating how to respond, how to twist this into something that would make her seem less guilty. I didn't give her the chance to hide behind more excuses. "Don't try to run from it, Laura," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "You've already done enough damage. Now it's time to answer for it." "I'll be waiting for you," she said flatly, her words barely a whisper before she hung up. I drove over to her sister's apartment, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. The drive felt endless, but the closer I got, the more determined I became. I couldn't let her off the hook. She had destroyed my son's trust in ways I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the lie, the deceit that had tainted everything they had built together. And I wasn't going to let her walk away without confronting the damage she'd done. When I arrived, I parked a little ways down the street and walked up to the apartment building. As I made my way to her door, I felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and disappointment. This wasn't the woman I had welcomed into our family. This was someone entirely different, someone unrecognizable. I knocked on the door, my knuckles making a sharp sound against the wood. I waited, and after a few moments, the door opened. Laura stood there, her face drawn and tired, but still maintaining that air of indifference she'd perfected. She didn't invite me in. She simply stood there, arms crossed, waiting. "I told you to come," she said, her voice flat. "What is it you want from me, Mr. Keller?" I stepped forward, my voice hardening with every word. "I want you to look me in the eye and tell me why you did it. Why did you betray my son? Why did you choose to destroy everything he thought was real?" Laura didn't flinch. Her gaze remained steady, though I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes. She wasn't as unaffected as she wanted me to believe, but she was still trying to justify it all. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she said, her voice now tinged with the faintest hint of emotion. "Things change. Jake and we drifted apart. We stopped connecting. I didn't know how to fix it, and then I met him." "Who is he?" I demanded. "Who is the man you've been seeing behind my son's back?" She hesitated for a moment, looking down at the floor. "His name is Mark. He's someone I met through work. It just happened. We connected in a way I hadn't with Jake in a long time." Her words stung, but I wasn't going to let her off that easily. "And that justifies what you did? Leaving him, betraying him like this?" Laura's eyes flashed with something. Anger, maybe, or regret. It was hard to tell, but she didn't apologize. She didn't take responsibility. Instead, she crossed her arms tighter, as though trying to shield herself from the weight of my questions. "I didn't want to hurt Jake, but the truth is, I don't love him the way I used to. I haven't for a long time. I tried to make it work, I really did, but I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't go on living a lie." "You could have been honest," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "You could have talked to him. But instead, you chose this, sneaking around, lying, breaking his heart." "I know," she said, her voice quieter now, the bravado slipping away. "But it was easier to keep it secret. I wasn't ready to face it." "Now you have to face it," I replied coldly. "You've broken him, Laura. You've destroyed everything he believed in. And you owe him the truth." For a moment, she stood there, her head lowered, as if taking in the weight of what I'd said. But I wasn't done yet. There was one thing I needed her to understand. "This doesn't just affect you and Jake," I said, my voice hardening. "It affects everyone who loves him. You've hurt all of us. You've broken his trust, and you've caused damage that will take years to undo. And now, you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your actions." She didn't respond right away, her face unreadable. Then, just as I turned to leave, she spoke again. "I never meant for it to get this far," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt anyone." I didn't answer her. What was there to say? The truth was out. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. As I walked away, I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. Laura might have felt remorse, but the damage was done. And Jake would never be the same. A week had passed since my confrontation with Laura. The tension in the house had grown heavier with every day. Jake was different now, more withdrawn, quieter. The lightness in his step that had once been there was gone, replaced by a heaviness that weighed him down with every movement. His eyes were hollow, distant, and it broke my heart to watch him try to function, to put one foot in front of the other while everything he believed in had come crashing down around him. He still came over to see me, but each time, it felt more like a formality. He was doing what was expected of him, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but his mind was miles away, lost in a sea of confusion and hurt. There was so much I wanted to say to him, but I didn't know how to make the pain go away. There was no magic word, no piece of advice that could heal the wound Laura had left behind. The damage was done, and all I could do was be there for him. It was on one of these days, as I sat in the living room reading the newspaper, that Jake came in, looking as though he hadn't slept in days. His face was pale, the stubble on his chin showing how little care he'd taken in his appearance. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just staring at the floor, before he finally spoke. Dad, we need to talk. I put down the paper and stood up, immediately concerned by the serious tone in his voice. What's going on, son? Jake sighed, his eyes flickering to the side. I, I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that everything is fine. I knew what he was saying before he even said it. I could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air like a thunderstorm waiting to break. He was done. He was done trying to hold it all together. And I couldn't blame him. I've been thinking about everything. Jake continued, his voice tight with emotion. About Laura. About us. And I can't stop going in circles. I don't know what to do anymore. Part of me wants to forgive her, part of me wants to move on, but another part of me is just so angry. How could she do this to me, Dad? How could she betray me like that? I moved to sit beside him on the couch, trying to offer whatever comfort I could, but I knew there was nothing I could say that would make the pain go away. Jake, I said softly, my hand resting on his shoulder, I can't tell you what to do, but you've got to listen to your heart. Don't let her actions define you, son. You're better than this. You deserve someone who will love you the way you love them. Jake's face contorted in anguish as he ran a hand through his hair. But I loved her, Dad. I really did. And now I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how to rebuild myself after this. I watched him struggle, his emotions crashing over him like waves against the rocks. It was painful to see him like this, so lost, so broken. And yet, I knew he had to go through this. He had to experience the depth of the hurt in order to come out stronger on the other side. But that didn't make it any easier to watch. You don't have to have all the answers right now, I told him. Give yourself some time. You don't need to decide everything today. But whatever you choose, know that you have a family who loves you. We're here for you. Jake nodded, though it was clear he didn't fully believe it. The guilt and pain he carried were too much for him to shake off. I could see that. He was still in love with Laura, even though she had ripped his heart out. And that was the hardest part of all. He wasn't just dealing with the betrayal. He was also grappling with the loss of the future he had imagined with her. That's what made the pain so much deeper. I don't know if I can trust her again, Jake muttered, his voice barely a whisper. I looked at him, trying to find the right words. Jake, trust is something that's built over time. It's not something you can just fix overnight. But if you choose to move forward, whether that's with her or without her, you have to decide if you can ever trust her again. And if you can't, then you need to let go. For your own sake. Jake let out a long, shaky breath. He was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant as if he were somewhere else, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke again, his voice breaking the silence. I think I need to take a break from her, he said, his words heavy with finality. I need space to figure things out. I can't keep pretending like everything's okay when I'm so angry, so confused. I understand, son, I said, my heart aching for him. It's okay to take a step back. You don't have to make any big decisions right now. Just focus on yourself. Take care of you first. Jake nodded, but the look on his face told me that this was only the beginning. He was standing at the edge of something much larger than a breakup. He was standing at the edge of a personal transformation, and though it was painful, it was necessary. He needed to rebuild himself, to rediscover who he was without Laura. But as much as I wanted to shield him from the pain, I knew this was something he had to do alone. He had to face the consequences of her actions, and he had to come to terms with the fact that she had chosen someone else. That was the hardest part. As Jake left, I couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. I wanted to fix things for him, to make the hurt go away, but this was his journey. And as much as it broke my heart to see him in so much pain, I knew that in time, he would heal. He would rebuild, and he would learn from this. The weeks following Jake's decision to take a step back from Laura were some of the hardest for him. He'd gone through the motions of his daily life. Work, visits to the gym, meals with me. But there was something different about him now. It was as though he was walking through the motions of his life, but his heart was somewhere far away, lost in the wreckage of his relationship. His anger had begun to fade into a quiet resignation, but the sadness remained, buried just beneath the surface. It seemed as though he was trying to convince himself that he was okay, but the truth was, he wasn't. He spent more time with me in the evenings, often coming over for dinner after work. He would sit across from me, his eyes still tired, his movements slow. Sometimes we would talk. Other times, we would sit in silence, the weight of the unsaid things hanging in the air. But I could see it in him. He was beginning to heal. Slowly, but surely. But it wasn't just the pain of betrayal that was dragging Jake down. As the days went by, I could see that he was questioning everything. He was no longer sure about his ability to trust anyone again. Not just Laura, but everyone. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Trust wasn't something you could just rebuild on your own. It had to be earned. And the longer Jake spent isolating himself, the harder it would be to open up again. One evening, Jake came over to the house looking more agitated than usual. I noticed the change immediately, the way he was pacing around the kitchen, his fingers drumming against the countertop as he tried to organize his thoughts. "Dad," he said abruptly, turning to face me. "I can't do this anymore. I need to confront Laura. I have to know what she's thinking. I can't keep living like this, with all these questions hanging over me." I sat down at the kitchen table, my heart heavy with the knowledge that this conversation was inevitable. "Jake, are you sure this is what you want?" I asked, trying to gauge his emotions. "You don't have to rush into it. You've already taken a big step by walking away from her. You don't have to put yourself through more pain." "I have to know," Jake insisted, his voice firm but full of raw emotion. "I need closure. I can't keep wondering why she did this to me. Why she tore everything apart." I watched him for a moment, his face a mixture of resolve and vulnerability. He was right. He needed closure, and he couldn't get it until he faced Laura head-on. But I also knew that confronting her wouldn't be easy. It would bring up everything again, every raw, painful moment. And I wasn't sure he was ready for that. "I'll be there with you, son," I said, standing up from the table and placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Jake looked up at me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thanks, Dad. I need you there." We drove to Laura's sister's apartment together, the silence between us heavy and thick. Jake's knuckles were white as he gripped the door handle, his jaw clenched. I could feel his heart beating faster as we approached the building. He had been avoiding this moment for so long, but now he was finally ready to face the truth. When we arrived, I gave him a moment to gather himself before we walked up to the door. He knocked with a force that surprised me, the sound echoing through the hallway. We waited in silence, the weight of what was about to happen hanging heavily in the air. Laura opened the door, her expression guarded. She hadn't expected us, and I could tell from the way she froze that she wasn't sure how to react. But when she saw Jake standing there, his face tense with emotion, something shifted in her eyes. Guilt? Remorse? I couldn't tell, but I knew this was the moment when everything would come to a head. "Jake, Mr. Keller," she said, her voice tight. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Jake said, his voice strained. "I need answers. I can't keep wondering what happened between us. I need to know why you did what you did. Why you betrayed me." Laura hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the directness of his question. But after a few seconds, she stepped back and gestured for us to come in. "Fine," she said quietly, her tone softer now. "Come in. We need to talk." We entered the apartment, and Jake sat down on the couch, his posture rigid as he tried to hold it together. Laura sat opposite him, her hands folded in her lap. The room was heavy with tension, and for a moment, no one spoke. We all just sat there, the silence stretching on longer than any of us was comfortable with. Finally, it was Jake who broke the silence. "I deserve an explanation, Laura. I deserve to know why you did this to me." Laura sighed, her gaze shifting to the floor. "I never meant to hurt you," she began, her voice quiet. But there was a sharp edge to it. "But I couldn't keep living a lie. Things between us had been falling apart for months, even before I met him." "Before you met him?" Jake echoed, his voice growing more incredulous. "You mean to tell me that you started seeing someone else, instead of talking to me about it? You couldn't even give me the decency of an honest conversation." "I was scared," Laura said, her voice breaking slightly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't. I didn't know what else to do." Jake's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw tightening with every word. He was holding back, trying to keep his composure, but I could see the storm inside him building. "You think this is about you not knowing what to do?" he said, his voice rising now. "You don't get it. You tore my life apart. I trusted you. I gave you everything, and you threw it all away for someone else. I can't even begin to process what that feels like." Laura's face softened, but only for a moment. "I know, Jake. I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. But I can't undo what I've done. All I can do is ask for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness," Jake repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. You want me to forgive you for this? For betraying me in the worst way possible? I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Laura said, her voice small now. But I hope one day you'll understand. I hope one day you can see that this wasn't easy for me either. Jake stood up, his anger and frustration boiling over. I don't know if I'll ever understand. But I'm done. I'm done with you. You don't deserve me. You never did. And with that, he turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving the past and Laura behind. I followed him out, my heart heavy but proud. Jake had finally faced the truth, and in doing so, he had made a decision that would define his future. It had been weeks since Jake had walked away from Laura. He had made the decision, and while it felt right at the time, the reality of living with that decision was proving to be much more complicated than he had anticipated. He was no longer weighed down by the constant reminder of her betrayal, but the emotional scars were still fresh, deep, and raw. I could see it in the way he moved, in the way he interacted with the world around him. He was struggling, trying to piece himself back together, but the cracks were still visible. He came over more often now, spending his weekends with me, and I could see that he was slowly starting to regain his footing. But there was still an air of sadness about him. The laughter that used to come so easily to him was absent, and I knew he was doing everything in his power to keep up appearances. It was almost as if he was afraid that if he let his guard down, he might fall apart completely. I didn't push him to talk about it. I knew he would when he was ready, but I also knew he had a long road ahead of him, and that was something I couldn't shield him from, no matter how much I wanted to. He had to walk through this pain, process it, and eventually heal. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Jake looked up from the beer he was nursing and met my gaze. There was something in his eyes, something that made my heart ache for him, but also filled me with a deep sense of hope. "Dad," he said quietly, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About Laura. And about me." I set my drink down and gave him my full attention. "What are you thinking, son?" Jake let out a deep breath, rubbing his hand over his face. "I thought I'd be angry forever. I thought I'd never trust anyone again. And for a while, I didn't think I could ever move on from this. But I'm starting to realize that I can't stay in that place forever." I watched him carefully, sensing a shift in him. He was talking about healing, about letting go of the anger that had consumed him for so long. But it wasn't just the anger that needed to be released. It was the bitterness, the resentment, and the self-doubt that had taken root in his heart. "I'm not saying I'm completely okay," he continued, his voice steady now. "But I've realized that I have to let this go. I can't let Laura's choices define who I am. I can't let her betrayal hold me back from the life I'm meant to live." I nodded slowly, feeling a sense of pride well up inside me. Jake was finally starting to understand. He was finally starting to grasp the truth that I had been trying to get through to him for so long. That he didn't need anyone else's validation to be worthy of love, respect, or happiness. His worth wasn't tied to Laura, and it never had been. "That's the first step, son," I said quietly, a lump forming in my throat. "You can't change the past, but you have control over your future. And the way you choose to move forward is what will determine your happiness." Jake smiled faintly, but there was something different about the smile now. It wasn't the empty, forced smile he had been giving lately. This one was softer, more genuine, like he was finally beginning to accept that his life was his to shape. "I think I'm ready to start over," he said, his voice tinged with a quiet hope. "I think I'm ready to trust again, to let people in. Maybe not right away, but one step at a time." I reached over and patted his shoulder. "That's all any of us can do. Take it one day at a time. And know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Jake nodded, the weight in his eyes slowly starting to lift. But the truth was, he had already begun his healing. It wasn't going to be an easy process, and it would take time, but he was on the right path. And that was all I could ask for. The next few days were a turning point for Jake. He began to take small steps toward reclaiming his life, going out with friends, taking on new projects at work, and even starting to engage in hobbies he had put aside while in the midst of his heartbreak. But there was still something unspoken between us, a shared understanding that the journey was far from over. One evening, as Jake prepared to leave after another dinner together, he stopped by the door and turned to face me. "Dad, I'm thinking about moving out," he said, his voice hesitant. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You don't have to rush into anything. You can stay here as long as you need to." "I know," he said, a small smile on his face. But I think it's time. I need to carve out my own space, make it feel like my own again. It's not about running away from the past. It's about moving forward. I could see it in his eyes. He was ready to take the next step, to start fresh in a place that was his own. And though it hurt to see him go, I knew it was the right choice for him. It was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when he could truly begin to rebuild his life on his terms. Whatever you need, son, I said, my voice steady. You're always welcome here. But I think you're making the right choice. Jake nodded, his smile growing a little more confident. Thanks, Dad. I'll keep you posted. As he left, I stood by the door for a moment, watching him walk away. It was bittersweet, watching him move toward his future, but I couldn't deny the pride I felt. Jake was stronger than he knew, and I had no doubt that he would be okay. But there was one thing I knew for sure. The road ahead would be long. It would be full of challenges, of moments where he would doubt himself, but it would also be full of new opportunities. New chances for love, for happiness, and for trust. Jake had moved into his new apartment a few weeks ago, and though he was still adjusting to living on his own, it was clear that the change had been good for him. The apartment was small, but it was his, a fresh start, a place where he could begin to rebuild without the ghosts of the past hovering over him. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a spark in his eyes that had been missing for months. It wasn't a complete recovery, but it was progress. Yet despite the distance, despite the steps Jake had taken toward healing, I could see that there was one thing still hanging over him. He hadn't fully confronted Laura, not in the way he needed to. And I knew that until he did, he wouldn't be able to truly let go. One evening, Jake came over for dinner, but he seemed more distant than usual. He barely touched his food, and when he spoke, it was with a quiet edge of frustration. I knew something was on his mind. Dad, he began, his voice tense, I've been thinking a lot about everything lately. About Laura. About what she did. And I feel like I'm still carrying this weight. It's like there's a part of me that still hasn't fully let go. I set my fork down, watching him carefully. You've made so much progress, Jake, I said gently. You're moving forward. You're building your life again. But I can see that something's still holding you back. What is it? He looked down, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if he were bracing himself. I think I need to talk to her one last time. I need to ask her something I've been wondering about for a long time. I need to know why she never gave me the chance to fight for us. Why she didn't tell me the truth before it all blew up. I nodded, understanding the weight of what he was asking. You don't owe her an explanation, Jake, I said quietly. But if this is something you need to do to find peace, then I'll support you. You don't have to carry this around forever. Jake stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. I don't know if I can ever forgive her. I don't know if I even want to. But I need to understand. I need to know if she ever cared about me. If she ever felt anything for me beyond whatever it was that led her to betray me. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was torn between wanting closure and fearing the possibility that the answer would destroy him all over again. But I also knew this was a necessary step for him to truly move on. You don't have to make any big decisions tonight, I said, standing and walking over to him. But if you're going to confront her, remember that you're doing this for yourself. Not for her, not for anyone else. This is your journey, Jake. And whatever happens, you'll be okay. He gave me a small, uncertain smile, but there was a flicker of resolve behind it. Thanks, Dad. I think I'm ready. I need to do this. And maybe after, I can finally let her go. The next day, Jake reached out to Laura. It was a simple text. We need to talk. Can you meet me? And to my surprise, she agreed. I had expected more resistance from her, more avoidance, but perhaps she had come to a point where she, too, needed closure. That evening, Jake left the apartment with a heavy heart, his posture stiff, as though he were bracing for impact. I could only wait, knowing that whatever happened in that meeting would be the final chapter in this painful saga. I didn't know what transpired between them during their meeting. Jake hadn't shared the details with me when he returned, but I could see it in his face. It wasn't the devastation I had feared. There was no look of defeat in his eyes. Instead, there was a calmness, a sense of finality. I talked to her, Jake said quietly, sitting down across from me. His voice was steady, but there was an emotional weight behind it that I couldn't quite place. I asked her everything. I asked her why she did it. I wanted to know if she had ever loved me at all. I waited, watching him, sensing that this moment had been crucial for him. She said she didn't know how to love me anymore. that she felt suffocated, that she had fallen out of love with me long before she met Mark. Jake continued, his voice softer now. She said she was sorry, but that didn't change anything. I told her I couldn't keep living in the past. I needed to move on. And I think she understood. I don't know if she felt remorse, but I could tell she regretted how it all ended. I could feel the weight lifting off Jake's shoulders, as though a burden had been released. So what now? I asked gently, unsure of what direction he would take next. Jake let out a deep breath, his gaze steady as he looked at me. I'm moving on, Dad. I'm not going to carry this around anymore. It doesn't matter why she did it. It doesn't matter if she ever loved me. What matters is that I'm ready to be happy again. I'm ready to trust again. The smile on his face was genuine this time, not the forced one he had worn for so long. And though I knew it would take time for Jake to truly heal, I saw something in him that hadn't been there before, a sense of peace, of acceptance. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something else, something even more powerful, freedom. Jake stood up, walking to the window, his posture more relaxed than I had seen it in months. He turned to me with a small but genuine smile. I think I can finally start moving forward. I didn't need to say anything. I could see it in his eyes. He had found the strength to let go of the past. Laura's betrayal no longer had power over him. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about releasing the hold that bitterness had on his life. And that was when I knew, with certainty, that Jake would be okay. He had faced the truth, had faced the hurt, and now he was ready to heal. He was ready to rebuild. As I watched him walk toward the door, ready to face whatever the future had in store for him, I felt a deep sense of pride. My son had made it through the worst of it. And no matter what came next, I knew that this was just the beginning of his journey. Author's note: Jake's journey was one of pain, confusion, and ultimately strength. The story is a reflection of the human capacity to heal, to confront the past, and to rebuild after betrayal. It's not about erasing the hurt, but learning to live with it and move forward. Jake's story reminds us that we all have the power to let go of the things that hold us back and create a future defined not by our past, but by our own choices.